Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, family, and everybody else, such a great pleasure to be with you today on the latest edition of Real Talk with Billy and Cory, live from our homes on Zoom University. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Hot Take Billy Parvatam on hand, joined by my podcast partner, Uncornelius Michael. Some people call him Cory Van Dyke. Cory, it's great to be back with you for yet another one via Zoom.
Yeah, it is great to be back, Billy, and we have a very VT-centric edition today on the podcast. Looking forward to talking a lot of things Virginia Tech and specifically Virginia Tech football towards the end of this season, but a lot going on with the Hokies.
And of course, it is UVA week. You guys see I've donned my special Virginia Tech beanie, so I'm very excited to hopefully beat UVA and get the Commonwealth Cup back. But before we get to the specific discussion, I want to introduce a friend of both of ours. He's a 2018 Virginia Tech graduate. He's currently a law student at Elon. He just finished his semester recently, so very proud of him. None other than our friend Brady Hess. Brady, I believe this is the first time you've joined us on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, man. First time guest. So appreciate you guys having me on today.
For sure. And no disrespect to any of the great Hokie fans I know. I've said this before to Brady. He is the biggest Virginia Tech fan I know. You see the back of his room. He's been to every game you can think of since 2000. So very happy to have you on, Brady, for a very special week. So let's get right to it, fellas. Let's first talk about it was very expected a blowout loss to Clemson on Saturday night. I believe the final score was 45-10. Got to give credit to the Hokies. They actually made it interesting for the first half. At one point, they led 10-7. I said that they should have stopped the count. We should have just ended the game right there and called it a victory. But, of course, we had to play the rest of the game, and Clemson ends up pretty much pulling away in the second half. It got so disrespectful that ESPN put Ian Book on as an interview during the second half. But we'll get to that later. But, Cory, what are your thoughts on the game? I feel like I was more invested than I thought I should have been in the first half. Give the Hokies credit. They had a couple of close plays, including a Hail Mary that was just a yard short. You never know how the half might have ended if that had gone through. But nonetheless, I said before the week we're going to be 4-6, and coming in today we are 4-6. What are your thoughts on the blowout loss to a team that's probably going to the college football playoff?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the Hokies, and especially in that first half, they came out with a great game plan. I thought it was really limiting the number of possessions, the number of plays that Clemson's offense was out on the field by draining the clock, by taking each offensive snap that the Hokies had down to basically the last 5 seconds of the play clock before snapping the ball. And it worked out great. You looked at the Hokies. Clemson only had 4 possessions in that first half, scored 17 points off those 4 possessions, but they certainly did what they needed to do to keep in the game. And I think I've always said that about Justin Fuentes. He's a good X's and O's coach. It's the other areas in the game where you might find issues with him. But I think it was an excellent game plan. The players, might not have executed it to the full degree with it being a 17-10 game. And I think it certainly could have been even closer than that. But really then you saw the turnovers and whatnot in the second half is what did it. In 3 fumbles in the second half, 2 of them immediately turned into 14 points for Clemson. And then the defense was pretty much done at that point once they're defending a short field. Once the Hokies game plan kind of goes out the window when they're behind, then really didn't have a shot of holding down that Clemson offense for so long. So like you kind of said, a little more invested at the beginning, kind of was expecting maybe a little bit of a blowout from the beginning, but a great game plan. It just wasn't fully executed all the way that it might not have needed to be.
Brady, you've been going to Hokie games as long as you can remember. Unfortunately, not this year, but because of the pandemic. What were your thoughts on the game last night? And as a Virginia Tech fan, have you ever experienced a season like this season?
Yeah, I think if I said that I had, it'd be a little bit fictitious because everything that has went into 2020, just such unprecedented times. Hopefully, we never come in contact with it again. But we've been pretty lucky in Blacksburg, Billy. My whole life, the Hokies have never had a losing season in the regular season. We know after the bowl loss in 2018, they were below 500. But this is uncharted territory for a lot of people. We were spoiled for a really long time, and hopefully we can beat Virginia and make it look a little bit better than what it has been. But it's been a crazy year. Like you said, wasn't really expecting the blood pressure to get fired up there in the first half. But, man, like Cory said, the Hokies had a pretty good game plan. And You got to keep the ball away from Clemson and Trevor Lawrence, who's undoubtedly going to be the first pick in the draft. Great player, and the Hokies come out in the first half, played well. Would have liked to have seen the foot on the gas a little bit there to end the half, because for Virginia Tech, you don't have anything really to lose in the game. And you see with that Hail Mary pass at the last play, you come up just a little bit short. But and then, like we were talking about just a second ago, in the second half, the wheels fall off the train. You get a Diablo interception, and you're like, man, maybe we're going to swing some momentum back to immediately turn the ball over the very next play. But Clemson, like you all mentioned, great team, great program. You can't help but like Dabo. That might not be a popular opinion in the ACC, but you see a guy who's got so much charisma and such a personality and loves his guys. BYOG, bring your own guts. Dabo is the type of personality I like to see. But Hokies an expected loss, and they kept it close for longer than what I think a lot of the country thought.
Cory, the year Clemson won their first national championship under Dabo and Deshaun Watson, the Hokies took them to within a possession loss in the AC championship game. And then we played them the following fall in Blacksburg with a packed house on hand. It seems like after this game on Saturday, we are farther away from Clemson than we were 3 years ago. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even you look at that Hokies team, they were filled with guys who are making plays in the NFL right now. Even you look at, the Edmonds brothers, you look at, Stroman was a cornerback out there, and you have a guy like Gerard Evans who was the best quarterback that the Hokies have had since Justin Fuente has been the coach. So I think, that's all the difference right there between, that team and this year's team. And Clemson has remained, the same dominant force and maybe even taken it up a notch. So, I mean, you look at that and you kind of wonder, like, how does that happen? But Clemson has kind of been on this trajectory for a long time now, pretty much since Taj Boyd was their quarterback, kind of brought them to a major bowl. I think it was 2011 kind of was the jump start to Clemson taking their team to new heights now. And it's kind of interesting. That was, also the year, Virginia Tech had Logan Thomas as their quarterback. They go to a Sugar Bowl that year, but Clemson just dominated them that year in the two matchups that they had. So it's a continually looking at, and like, where has it gone wrong now for the Hokies over these past, I guess 4 years now, since that 4 or 5 years now that Justin Fuente has been at the helm. And I don't really think I have the right answer. That's up to the guys in the locker room to make that distinction. The guys make the decisions, the coaches and stuff like that. There's certainly a number of different areas you can point to, but I mean, I think it's kind of past the point now where you would have liked to see results trending in the opposite direction than they really are right now in Blacksburg.
Brady, there's obviously a lot of speculation swirling. Every Hokie fan is talking about the status of Justin Fuente's job after the season. I have to ask you point blank, are you in the fire Fuente crowd, or do you think he deserves another year?
I mean, it's not been a lot of improvement over the last 5 years. I mean, you've kind of saw it. It's like one of those pie grass, probably not the right terminology, but it's the backward curve, and that's exactly what it seems to be the last 5 years. I think something's got to give, and kind of like what Cory said, we're not the ones who can make those decisions. I do think something has to give, whether it's at Fuente or somewhere on down the line, because you're seeing Frank Beamer's life work kind of get erased a little bit. And it's hard to win at a place like Virginia Tech. It's hard to recruit to a place like Virginia Tech. And when you have the things that went toward Virginia Tech's favor for so long, when you see those things erode away, it makes that hill tougher to climb, because us three know it, being Hokies, the people make it. For a kid who grew up in nowhere, Virginia, it was somewhere I always wanted to be. But pitch that to a kid from the 757 who you can still be one of the program's best to ever play, but when you've got Saban rolling in and he's got one on each finger, it's kind of hard to compete with things like that. But I don't know what the answer is, Billy. I do think that there needs to be some sort of change, and I would expect that we will know sooner than later what direction that Babcock and the gang think is necessary for Virginia Tech.
Cory, I have to ask you a question that your boss, Chris Coleman, brought up, I think, on one of the podcasts recently on TSL. Will Tech fans ever truly be happy? I mean, do we have unreasonable expectations for this program? Because, look, even if we have a pretty solid coach, I don't think we're going to overtake Dabo Swinney and Clemson anytime soon. And we're probably not, because of our facilities, competing with Alabama or Ohio State or some of those big-time college football programs anytime soon. So do you think that Tech fans have unreasonable expectations? Do you think we will ever be happy again?
I don't know. I think certainly a lot of it comes from, and Brady mentioned this at the top, where Virginia Tech fans have been spoiled in a sense for so long from that stretch from pretty much 99 to 2011, nothing but winning seasons, nothing but 10-win seasons, where you're looking at just year after year after year that you're expecting excellence, you're expecting to compete at the national level, and now the program has kind of gotten to this point where they're not doing that on a daily basis. They're not doing that every year. And fans, I think, still hold some of those expectations a little bit. I think personally, if Virginia Tech wants to get to a good place, that means obviously competing and winning the Coastal Division. That should be number one. We are in a Coastal Division where Miami, I guess, is really the team right now that looks like, obviously there's no divisions this year, but they would be the team that would have been up top there. And that's a team Virginia Tech has competed on, at a national level for all those years in the past too. I mean, you've seen Miami kind of come back a little bit, obviously not back to, the U like they were, and saying the U is back and whatnot. But I think Virginia Tech and the expectations of fans should certainly be to compete, at that sort of level of a 9-win season, a 10-win season and stuff like that. I don't think any reasonable fan should be expecting national championship at this point, because that's only, a select few teams that are even at that level. But it even is a certain, even trend we've kind of seen across the country lately, where these dominant teams of the past have kind of taken a step back. You look at, Florida State and what all that they were and the steps back they've taken. You look at even Penn State this year, they're nowhere close to where they were. You look at Nebraska, a team that was in, the 90s, winning all those games, and they're kind of in mediocrity right now. So I know Virginia Tech fans don't ever want to get to that point, but it certainly has to get to a point where, I mean, we'll talk to this sure a little later on with more stuff with Fuente, I'm sure, but like you sort of have to get to a point where, like Brady was saying, you can't ruin everything that those players have worked for to build up to this point. Like those former players of the past have built what Virginia Tech football is today. Frank Beamer and Bud Foster have built what Virginia Tech football is today. And once that starts to become, erased in people's minds, it's going to lead to a dangerous place.
Michigan with Jim Harbaugh is another program that's taken a step back recently. Brady, I have to ask you this question because I'm fascinated by it. Do we have recency bias when it comes to Justin Fuente? And do we forget the last few years under Beamer? I mean, you know better than anybody, those last few years with Frank, who, by the way, we all love, we all have met. He's a legend. He went to Tech. He's Hokie through and through. But we had to beat UVA to make some of those bowl games. I mean, I remember my freshman year, that terrible loss to Pitt in the rain. I think we only had like 100 yards of offense with Brendan Motley at quarterback. We had another bad loss to ECU. We had to beat UVA in a close victory to make a bowl game. Then you fast forward to my senior year under Justin Fuente. We lose to ODU, a terrible loss. And then we had a miracle. Basically, UVA gave us that game, I think. We had to beat them and then schedule Marshall to make a bowl game. At least to me, it doesn't seem like it's that much different when you compare my freshman year, the last year under Beamer, to my senior year, and even now under Fuente. Do you really think we're that much worse off right now under Fuente than we were in those last final few years of Frank coaching?
Man, I think that it's kind of like this. Frank, and like you said, we all loved Frank. I was under the impression that Frank Beamer could stay at Virginia Tech as long as he wanted to, and nobody should say anything to him. If he was still the coach now, and it was still kind of similar to what it was those final few years, I would have been fine with that. Maybe I'm in the minority, but what Fuente doesn't have working for him is, man, he comes in, he goes to Coastal his first year. It's go back to that curve I was talking about. And then the second year, you win 9 games. The third year, you come out and you win at Florida State, a place that the program has been historically bad at. Well, that's what's worked against Justin Fuente is he was so successful so early. And since then it's been a downhill curve, and you look and you're like, well, It was Frank's players he did well with. The recruits, those guys Cory mentioned at the top, the Edmonds brothers, Greg Stroman, people like that. And as Fuente has got his guys in there, that's when you've kind of seen it go down a little bit. You've seen guys transfer in and out. And yes, I believe the transfer portal has been better to Virginia Tech than what it has subtracted, with a few exceptions. I'm a little biased in some of those aspects, but nonetheless, you see what these guys are doing. It's what our Fuentes players are doing. And you're like, when will that get better? It's year 5. We're removed from Frank Beamer with the exception of Tyrell Smith. But nonetheless, how does it get better from here? The recruiting hasn't seemed to get better. It seems like our ties with high schools in the state of Virginia is not as good as they once were. And that's where Frank made his name, was in the state of Virginia, getting guys who wanted to be at home, wanted to have a hell of an experience in Blacksburg, and they were very successful. And you look back at those 99 teams, 95 teams, the teams in the 2000s, it was Virginia made and Virginia bred. And we've seemed to have gotten away from that. And you see guys going to Penn State, Alabama, and they're having great careers, and it's just unbelievable.
Cory, do you think we have recency bias? Because the recruiting problems in the state also were happening in the last few years of Frank as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would tend to agree more towards what Brady's talking about. Like, you guys got to give Beamer a little bit of a benefit of the doubt with all that he did to building the program. And I think many fans did kind of get the sense that he was towards the end of his tenure and was going to retire. It certainly wasn't at any point that Beamer would have been fired or anything like that. You can't fire a legend. But I mean, I think the points that Brady is touching on are valid. I think, recruiting is one of the biggest issues where, like we said, Virginia, you looked at those rosters that Virginia Tech had back in the 90s and the early 2000s and stuff like that. It's littered with guys from the 757, from Richmond and from Florida. But you look at, today, and we're making a move towards Texas that didn't work out and spending all our energy there that simply was a bust, to call it frank. I don't know. You look at it, and it's really a shame too, because you have guys like Lauren Johnson, one of the greatest cornerbacks all time at Virginia Tech. He's a head coach at Highland Springs, one of the best programs in the state of Virginia, a high school program right in Richmond. And they're having guys every year going to Clemson, going to all these other places. Like, why isn't there a pipeline there where he's sending his best guys to Virginia Tech? Why isn't there a pipeline, at all these other places that had all these Hokie legends? Why isn't there a pipeline continuing to be built there? It really is kind of head scratching in a sense. And that was even, I've talked to a lot of former players. I've been doing a really cool article series this year where talking to former players about, some of their best games and stuff like that. And I always ask them at the end, like, what is your thoughts on the 2020 team? And that's something they continually bring up, is like, you have to dominate the state. Like Dorian Parker, he brought that up last time I talked to him. He says, like, you turn on a game on Saturday now and you see all these guys from Virginia, like we were saying, playing at these big name programs. It's like, Virginia Tech isn't going to get every one of those guys, but you have to get like the guys that you want, the guys that are, Buzz Williams has that phrase, our kind of guys. I think Virginia Tech can have their kind of guys too from the state of Virginia to build it up. And there's a lot of talent in the state, and just really not going out there and looking at it in a way that I think coaches even kind of want to exploit that in a sense.
And Brady, that's something you and I have talked about before. I mean, are we doing a good job reaching out to people who are from your neck of the woods or elsewhere in the state of Virginia? It really seems like we've lost a grip on recruiting in our own state.
I mean, I think that we have lost the grip on it. And I mean, this is my most critical point. And I'm not getting paid to be a head coach of Division I program, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But there's not a lot of Division I athletes, football athletes, that come out of Southwest Virginia, my neck of the woods. And when I'm saying that, I'm not including Blacksburg. I'm including the far southwest portion of the state, the coal fields, and like where Justin Hamilton's from, where James Mitchell is from, where guys like Austin Fuller, who's from Richlands, who played at Virginia Tech on those last few ACC championship runs. There's not a lot of guys coming out of there, but the guys who are coming out of there, you got to get a thumb on those guys. And you see how big James Mitchell has been to Virginia Tech. For an example, a handful of guys. And like I said, I'm not scouting players day in and day out, but you've got Martin Lucas, who was the running back at Abingdon down here. Trenton Adkins, running back at Ridgeview. Brody Meadows at Graham. Ahmad Bradshaw's son at Graham. And you look at all these guys, and Arizona State comes into Southwest Virginia and offers every single one of these guys. And Virginia Tech it's in Virginia Tech's backyard. And those guys, none of those guys that I mentioned had a scholarship offer from Virginia Tech. You look at Cameron Allen, who is a defensive back at Purdue right now, was the 2A state player of the year for the VHSL, top 5 best high school football players I've seen in my life. And the Hokies didn't offer him. He's starting for the Boilermakers. Just things like that. Isaiah Johnson, who was number 1 recruit in the state of West Virginia before he moves to Florida out of Bluefield. I think the Hokies had offered him, but those types of guys you need to make a pitch to. Stay at home. Let's make something great. Let's make a run like we went on in the 90s and 2000s. And I just think that's something. And my line I go back to is, if you are from Southwest Virginia and D1 potential, Virginia Tech needs to know on Tuesday morning what you're going to eat for dinner on Friday morning. I mean, that's how big of a grasp they need to have on it, but that's not the case. It's worked out for these guys, and I'm glad. But I'd like to see the in-state recruiting get a little bit better. And I mean, that's another tangent for another day. But I'd like to see the Hokies get a better grasp on the state of Virginia, because we've saw that those guys can be successful.
And speaking of the state of Virginia, let's talk about the big game this Saturday night. The Hokies and the Who's in Blacksburg in an empty Lane Stadium. Guys, of course, the Hokies lost the Commonwealth Cup for the first time in forever. Here's an interesting stat for you. Obama went through his entire presidency, and the Hokies maintained the Commonwealth Cup. So the fact that they lost it after, 15, 16 years, quite a remarkable feat. But, Cory, Hokies come into this game having lost 4 in a row. The Who's have come into this game having won 4 in a row. It's just my personal opinion. I don't see how the Hokies win this game. I mean, if I pick them, it's going to be an emotional appeal. But I tell you what, the way the Hokies have been floundering and the way the Who's have been playing, again, you got to look at the competition. But it's going to be a tough matchup for the Hokies. What do you think going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit last week, how this should be, and it will be, Virginia Tech's so-called Super Bowl this year. Like, this is the game. This is the game that all the guys should be looking forward to. Even, we had our press conferences this week with some of the players, and it sounded like those players still hurt from the loss of last year, and that should be the case. Like, you lose a game like that last year where we talked about where if they win that game last year, they go to the ACC championship against Clemson. They then likely go to the Orange Bowl as well. And they missed that opportunity because the guys kind of came out a little bit flat in that game. Perkins runs all over them in the first quarter. And that's the end of that game. You look at it and, you had guys on Tuesday in the press conferences, James Mitchell, talking about how the last play and the fans storm in the field and him having to walk through all the fans storm in the field. He still lives with that every night. So you have players like that I think should motivate this team to go out there and play with a little bit of an edge, play with a little bit of intensity. They were even talking about how Justin Fuente has been showing them, film all week from that game, little cut-ups of just little moments in one-on-one battles where the Virginia player wanted it more last year and using that as motivation. So it's like Jared Hewitt, I think, said it best. If you can't get up for this game, if you can't bring the energy for this game, like, you're not in the right profession, you're not in the right sport. So I'm expecting it. You say you don't see a way that Virginia Tech can win. I think the Hokies certainly can win this game. I think we've seen that, in a rivalry like this, where there were certainly times when Virginia was certainly an inferior opponent and they played close against the Hokies. I don't think it's even at that level. I think, Virginia's been a good team this year. I wouldn't say great or anything along those lines. They still are 5-4, 4 straight wins, but I don't know. I think you look at it and you say it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. And I certainly would say with the Hokies at home, with everything that's been going on, I would give them a chance to win this game.
Yeah, because the streak, at least at home, is still intact. I'd have to go and look the last time the Hokies lost at home, but at least that streak is intact. Of course, Brady, I want to hear your thoughts on this game, but you've been watching this rivalry, again, your whole life. Have you ever felt as nervous about a UVA Tech game going into this one?
I am nervous about this game every single year, and that is no lie at all. I think the Hokies got a chance. It's interesting what you said at the top, that it never left during the Obama presidency. And I got to thinking about just that stat. And to think that the Commonwealth Cup left Blacksburg more in the Bill Clinton presidency than it did the following 3 presidencies put together. That's kind of that's crazy to think about. But nonetheless, you got to get up for this game. UVA hates Virginia Tech. I hate the University of Virginia. And I hope that everybody in that locker room feels the same way that I do on Saturday. I'm fired up about it. I wish I had a say in how it's going to go out. I think it's going to be a tight ball game. This game never fails to be a tight ball game. I mean, you look back at the scores over the years, and the only one that really a few that come to mind is the 16 game when Tech blew out Virginia, and then in 2011, the 38-0 game there in Charlottesville. But other than that, it's a tight game. Cody Journell kicking field goals to win. Bryce Perkins fumbling to win. Last year, a couple missed opportunities by the Hokies, some turnovers, and it's down to the wire. So I think it'll be down to the wire Saturday in Blacksburg. Hokies not lost to the Hoos in Blacksburg since 1998. So it's been a long time. I was just about 2 years old then, so I don't remember that. So as far as I remember, I cannot remember UVA winning in Blacksburg.
Cory, of course, I was going to say all of us were under 2 years old when that happened, so we have no recollection of that. I've never believed that, a coach's, status is ever decided on one game. If Fuente wins this game, any shot that he retains his job, or do you think, irrespective of this game, his status is out of his hands?
No, I don't think this game really determines it one way or the other. I don't think he loses this game and it's automatically he's out, or he wins this game and he automatically stays out. I think it's more so built upon, what the big time donors are saying, built upon what him and Witt's relationship is like, different things like that. So yeah, I don't think the outcome of this game really determines which way it goes. If this is Justin Fuente's last game, Chris Coleman, put this in his preview article, you would like to see him go out on a win. Like if you can say anything about Justin Fuente, he has run a clean program. There's been no sense of even smell of a scandal going on in this program. There's been no sense of cheating or anything like that. Like he has been an upstanding guy in that regard. So you would like to see him, if this is his last game, go out as a winner in this one, especially with sort of the amount of, I don't know, just ridicule, the amount of just people opining about him. To go out as a winner against UVA, that would be a special moment, I would feel like, for anyone.
Brady, of course, feel free to answer that question. Do you think Fuente's job is predicated on this game? And also, because you bring the historical perspective of being a longtime Hokie fan, what would you say is the best Virginia Tech win, or even just game, that you've seen in this rivalry?
Oh, man, that's tough. Best game I've seen in the rivalry. My favorite one is the 15 win, Frank's last win at Scott Stadium. That was a lot of fun. And that's probably one of my top 5 favorite games, period. The 1 in 18 was a lot of fun. You can't get much more theoretical than that, theater-like. Then the one in 2014, my freshman year, that one was a lot of fun. But, man, I don't know if it hinges or not, but I'm going to tell you this. If everybody thought that Twitter was a cesspool of just negativity and hatred toward this whole situation, if he loses back-to-back against Virginia, he's the most hated man in Blacksburg. And I believe that. I truly believe that. I mean, you can't lose to Little Brother back-to-back years and not have success everywhere else. I mean, in the years where the rarity that Beamer lost back-to-back to those guys, there was success other places after you get out of the lean few years before 1992 is what I'm saying with that. But I think it could get ugly if Witt wasn't feeling the heat from people before to make a decision. if the clock hits triple zeros and the Who's are winners again, he's going to his hind end's going to be on fire, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, for sure. And another stat for you guys, Mike London went through his entire tenure at UVA and never beat Virginia Tech in, 5-6 years he was there. So, obviously, Fuente, I think, is going to feel the heat for sure if he does not win this game. Let's hear our predictions, guys. Like I said, I didn't see how, Tech could win this game, but I want to hear what you guys think. Cory, give me a prediction.
It really is a battle of like head versus heart and stuff like that. But, I mean, I truly do think the Hokies show up on Saturday. And if they don't, then there are much bigger issues that need to be diving into. But I think they do show up and get up for this game. I'm going to say Hokies 27-24.
All right. So Cory's going with the Hokies. Brady, how about you?
I'm going with the Hokies in a tight one, Billy. I don't know exactly a score, but just for lack of knowledge on what I want the score to be, I think I'm going to go 28-21 Hokies.
All right. I will go against my head and pick the Hokies in an emotional pick. I'm going to say a low-scoring game, guys. Might be a little bit out there. I'm saying 13-10 Hokies. I don't think any of these teams move the ball that well on offense, and I think it'll be a very defensive struggle, but I think Hokies playing on their home field, even though there won't be too many fans in the stands, I think they win a tight one, 13-10. So all of us are picking the Hokies. And we hope they prove us right, but we'll see what happens for sure. I did want to talk about something that is not directly affiliated with the program, but of course made news on the same day that the Hokies got blown out by Clemson. And that is, of course, Frank Beamer. We've talked about him, the legend at Virginia Tech. His son, Shane Beamer, after stops at Georgia and Oklahoma, gets hired by South Carolina to be their next head coach. Of course, that was a guy who me and Cory and Brady, I'm sure you had similar feelings that we thought he was probably a front runner for this Virginia Tech job. I know a lot of fans wanted Whit Babcock to hire him. But, Cory, let's start with you. A guy like Beamer, it would have been speculated he was going to South Carolina, and it finally is official. What are your thoughts on him going to SC, and how does that make Virginia Tech look?
I mean, I think it doesn't make Virginia Tech look any kind of bad way. Like, Virginia Tech simply doesn't have an opening at this point. Like, you can't hire a guy when there is no hole to be filled right there. So I don't think it paints Virginia Tech in a bad picture or anything like that. But I mean, I'm certainly happy for Shane Beamer. He's a guy that, has that Beamer last name, but it certainly hasn't been, what has gotten him into the industry. It has been hard work. It has been him being a key piece at every place that he's been. And he, of course, was an assistant at South Carolina, a natural fit there, and under Steve Spurrier all those years. And, the players during his time loved him, much like the Virginia Tech former players love Shane Beamer. And, his most recent stops, I was kind of reading just stuff about him this week, how, he's chosen every spot that he's been strategically to build himself up into this head coaching one day, where he wanted to be under Kirby Smart and see, what the process was like of building up a program like Kirby Smart has done there, where they're a top 5 recruiting class pretty much year in and year out now in Georgia. He wanted to go to and follow Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, where they're, putting up these stellar offensive stats everywhere and seeing what it means to be a guy so involved in the offense like he has been there with Heisman Trophy winners, with guys runners up like Jalen Hurts last year and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think you look at Shane Beamer, he's a guy who has put in the work despite the last name kind of maybe, getting him in there a little bit, but he's certainly taken that place once he's gotten in there and reaching even greater extremes than one might even expect. So I think it's a great hire by South Carolina. You've even seen, I think it was, I don't remember if it was like him commentating on it or saying it was like he felt like he was a dream job or felt like he was home or something like that. And that kind of rubbed Virginia Tech people the wrong way a little bit or whatnot. But I mean, you got to give it to him, and I think he will have success in there. But I think, we talked about this a little bit last week. Could this potentially be a move where, even further down the road, he does become a head coach at Virginia Tech? Who knows? We'll just see how he goes and does as a Gamecock net right now.
Brady, of course, I don't know if you've actually met Shane Beamer, but you followed him for a long time. What are your thoughts on South Carolina hiring him? Should Hokie fans be upset that he was hired by the Gamecocks?
I think it's a great hire. Great move by South Carolina. Hokie fans, I understand the frustration and the displeasure, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it. But it sucks because that's who they would want to be the guy, and that's a guy who would have loved to come to Blacksburg. I guarantee it. But I think that it's a great hire. You listen to the press conference. He reminds me a lot of his dad, his loyalty. Love that he's going back to Oklahoma to finish the season with those guys. That says a lot about Shane's character. And it's like Cory said, he's put himself in places he needs to be to get to this job. And he said in the press conference, he told his wife when he left South Carolina to come to Blacksburg that if he ever wanted to be a head coach at South Carolina, that he needed to leave South Carolina when he did. And it looks like he called the shots pretty well, and he set himself up. He's going to get paid in the best football conference in the country, and it might be hard to lure him away from South Carolina one of these days. But I think Shane will be a great fit. He knows the game. He's a young guy. He's got a personality, and it's just like I was talking about with Dabo earlier. That goes so far, so far.
Well, Brady, this was something we talked about last week with Jake Lyman. Do you think South Carolina is a better job than Virginia Tech? I mean, they do have the facilities, which is, very important. But, unless Nick Saban or, one of these big-time SEC school guys retire, the South Carolina is not going anywhere. And they're probably going to lose to Clemson, most likely every year unless Dabo leaves or something happens. Whereas Tech, I mean, you've still got, I think, some allure from, the success that the team had in the 90s. And you're in the AC Coastal, the worst division in Power 5. I mean, do you think South Carolina is really a better job than Virginia Tech?
I mean, if you want to get success right away, I don't think that it is. But you look at it, South Carolina, the SEC is just unbelievable, man. I mean, I've been to some games on some SEC campuses, and it's just a different world. And I love Virginia Tech with all my heart. But the SEC is just a different breed. But you're onto something. I mean, you play Florida and Georgia every year. You play Clemson every year. That crossover, the SEC, may I add, does their crossover a lot better than the ACC does. So, I mean, you're going to be playing LSU or Alabama or Auburn every year, A&M, one of those teams every year. It's not going to be like the Louisville and the Hokies, who Louisville's been in the conference 7 years and they finally meet up by some – well, they were scheduled before COVID, but nonetheless, it took forever. And, I mean, it is just – that's another rip. Why is the ACC crossover so bad? Duke and North Carolina State have played each other one time since 2013. But that's another point for another day. But like you mentioned, Billy, ACC Coastal, worst division in football, Power 5 football, and you could have some success. But South Carolina, good facilities, great conference, but – if you can win at South Carolina, you can win anywhere. I will say that.
Cory, any chance that South Carolina becomes like a Blacksburg, Virginia Tech South? I mean, there's already been talks that Shane has talked to Torian Gray about leaving Florida as the defensive backs coach, coming in as his defensive coordinator. There were some rumors out there that maybe Bud Foster might want to come out of retirement, and I don't see Brady shaking his head and coach with Shane. I mean, do you buy any of that? Even if you don't buy the Bud Foster rumors, do you think he might try to recreate a Virginia Tech South at South Carolina?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't buy the Bud Foster rumors. There's no – that guy enjoys his lake house too much, and just the joy of not having the stress of recruiting and coaching football every those 4-hour belly aches like he was talking about every week. So that we can rule that out. But, I mean, I think he certainly could reach out to some of these other guys. And, some people have even asked him, are you going to create Beamer ball down there in South Carolina? And he said, yeah, we'll certainly look to score in all three phases of the game and stuff like that. So, certainly he will take after his father a lot. And, those relationships that he has built over those years could certainly come into effect.
I would love to see the Hokies get on the phone with South Carolina and schedule a game in the next few years in Blacksburg. I mean, that would be must-see TV to watch Shane Beamer coming back to Blacksburg. Brady, I did want to, close on this question. Of course, you can answer about, Bud Foster and Torian Gray, but does it upset you that there's, a lot of decent Hokies are in other coaching staffs? I mean, you look at a guy like Torian Gray at Florida. You look at a guy like Shane Graham, who I also think is at Florida. I mean, you've got some really solid coaches at other programs. I mean, don't you feel like, and I've made this point before about how, maybe it might be cool to bring some of these former players back, maybe not as big name as D'Angelo Hall, but I mean, look at guys like Torian Gray and Shane Graham who do have the experience. Don't you wish they were back in Blacksburg with their alma mater?
You got Todd Grantham down there in Florida too, so a buku of Hokies down there in Gainesville. But Yeah, I think there's something to be said if you can bring guys back to coach on the staff. And I mean, you got J.C. Price and Cornell Brown at Marshall. Those two guys literally laid the foundation for the Hokies program with Frank Beamer. And Cornell Brown coached a little while in Blacksburg. It would be cool to see some of those guys come home. It absolutely would. I'd like to see that one day, but we'll see how it goes. With the exception of Frank and just a handful of guys. I mean, you didn't see Bud wasn't from Tech. Charlie Wiles was not a Tech guy. Guys like that were not born and bred Hokies. Yeah, they became Hokies throughout time, but that might just be a testament to what Frank was able to do, getting guys molded, whatever. But I'd like to see more guys come home. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I wouldn't, because that'd be a lie.
Brady, any hot takes before we close out this conversation on Virginia Tech that you want to throw out there about the Hokies, whether it's football, you can even go to basketball. I mean, anything you want to throw out, maybe, in a couple of years we'll be back in the AC championship game contending for a playoff spot, or maybe the basketball team will make a Sweet 16 again sometime in the near future. I mean, anything, hot takes, anything Hokies you want to throw out there? I mean, you're Hokies #1 guy. Anything you want to throw out there?
Billy, I can't steal a page out of your book, buddy. I've heard a lot of hot takes from you over the years, and a lot that have just made me have one of those 4-hour-long belly aches that Cory was just talking about. So I'm going to stay out of the hot take department and leave that to you.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Cory, how about anything? I don't know if it's a hot take, but anything you want to throw out there? I mean, you know, especially with football, anything you think might happen down the road, you think is on the horizon, might happen?
I don't know. I think the one thing I would look out for, and I think it's the name that has kind of emerged as the favorite in the clubhouse per se, if Fuente is to go at the end of the season, is Tony Elliott and the Clemson offensive coordinator, what kind of fit he would be. So that's what I'm going to look at. I even, found it that I wanted to go watch his press conference after the Virginia Tech game to see what this guy was about. So that's not really a hot take or anything, but just something I would put out there for Hokie fans to kind of look at a little bit, to kind of research a little bit. Is this the kind of guy that you would want leading your program? Is this a guy that you can kind of even research now before, it even emerges later on that he might actually be the leader in the clubhouse? So I would say take a look at Tony Elliott, what he's kind of all about, and kind of form your own judgment on him per se.
Well, Brady, I'll close out the conversation with this question to you. Any coaches out there that you think would be a good fit for the Hokies as a head coach if Fuente is let go? I mean, I do like Tony Elliott. He's been offensive coordinator in a big-time program. You could probably get him for less money than, say, a guy like Brent Venables. People have thrown out Luke Fickell and some of these other guys. Any, couple coaches or maybe one guy you think, okay, maybe this guy might be good for fit for the Hokies?
I mean, I like Elliott. I like Luke Fickell. I like Luke Fickell a lot, but we'll see how it goes. I thought Doc Holliday for a little while from Marshall, but looking toward it, I mean, he's a West Virginia guy. He's older in his career, so I don't think he'd leave Marshall. But those are just a few names to throw out there.
All right, sounds good. Well, a great discussion on Virginia Tech. We'll see what happens with the big game this Saturday against the Hoos. Hopefully, Virginia Tech can reclaim that Commonwealth Cup. I did want to transition, Brady, to another team of yours. You're a big Braves fan. I mean, this is a team that has been really close to the World Series the last couple of years. They've got a lot of talent. The thing I always like to throw out about this past year is if Will Smith does not hit a home run off Will Smith when the Braves are up 3-1, you never know how that series ends up going out. But, Brady, what's been your thoughts on the Braves the last few years, and what do you think they have to do to win the World Series? They just signed Charlie Morton in the offseason, which I think is a huge move to get a big-name pitcher like him. But what are your thoughts on the Braves? What do they need to do to get to the promised land?
You got to keep shoring up pitching. You can't be scared to spend money. You can't forget how to run the bases. I'll tell you that, because they surely did forget how to do that. In addition to that Will Smith blast, if maybe Ozuna stays a little bit longer or maybe doesn't run at all there, it's a different series. So I'm hoping to see the Braves pull one out here soon. That would be a thrill, to say the least.
And Cory, like I mentioned, Charlie Morton gets signed by the Braves. How big do you think his addition makes the Braves as they face the Dodgers and some of these other teams in the NL?
No, yeah, I think that's a huge move. I mean, you look at the last several years, even Charlie Morton has become one of the most well-known postseason pitchers in the game. He's earned rightfully that moniker as as a clutch performer when he goes out there in the postseason. He did it this past year with the Rays. He did it with the Astros a couple of years back. So I think it's a huge point. When you looked at the Braves team this year, that probably was their weakest point, was the starting pitching. You look at them now, and that's a huge addition that can't be understated, I don't think.
Brady, I said when we did our first podcast after the World Series that if I had to do a World Series way too early, a year out, or at least the day after the last World Series, I would say the Braves and the Yankees. So I really like the Braves' chances to make it back. What are your thoughts? Do you think the Braves have what it takes to win next year? And are you picking them to go to the World Series?
As a Braves guy, I can't ever have that much confidence. So we'll see how it goes. As long as they keep it locked down in the East over some bums in D.C., I'll be pretty happy.
I can't complain about the Nats. I mean, they won a World Series, so I'm good for, a solid 20, 30 years. Cory, what do you think about the Braves' chances? Would you pick them right now to go to the World Series?
I think you would still be hard-pressed to pick against the Dodgers and just how dominant they are and will continue to be. But, I mean, I think you look at the Braves, they certainly – I would like to see one more move, maybe add another arm. But, the offense that they have should be spectacular again. And that's even a point I would want to bring up to you, Brady. Like, is there a more underrated star in the MLB than Freddie Freeman?
I would probably say no. I mean, finally gets the MVP this year, but he's flown under the radar for a very long time, and a good guy too. You can't understate that. A good guy there, and hopefully his success continues. Was really happy to see him win an MVP.
Especially considering the fact that he got COVID and lost a lot of weight, but he really didn't appear to miss a step. And then we didn't even mention Ronald Acuna Jr., one of the most exciting stars in the MLB. So, I mean, I think the Braves are right up there with the, top 2-3 teams, Braves, Dodgers, Yankees. I don't see there's any reason the Braves, if they can get past the Dodgers, at least in the NL, can win it all. But Brady, I also wanted to ask you about your other favorite team, that is the New England Patriots. I want to give you credit. You stuck with the Patriots even after Tom Brady retired, and the main reason you are a Patriots fan is because you have a guy from your hometown who played for him at one point. But what are your thoughts on how they played this season? I mean, they're 5-6 with Cam Newton, a guy who I think people forget. Cam Newton, when he was on fire, I mean, I'm not going to say he was better than Russell Wilson, but I would definitely say he was better than Lamar Jackson. I mean, he was a force during his MVP season. So what are your thoughts on the Patriots? They're 5-6, and, you got a couple of games like against the Seahawks and against the Bills where they lost by a possession or two. You never know. They may be solidly in a playoff spot, and they play tonight against the Rams as well.
Well, we talk about COVID making its havoc on Freddie Freeman, but, I mean, could an argument be made that if Newton doesn't get coronavirus when he did, could be a different story? I mean, you lose against the Seahawks, and after that game, you're feeling like, dang, they're not going to miss a beat after Tom goes to the Bucs. And then he gets COVID, and they lose a couple games there, but they've looked okay the last handful of weeks. Dave Portnoy said last week the Super Bowl is back on, so we will see if they can get it done tonight in primetime against the Rams. But I think the offense still needs to be a little bit more promising in New England.
And Cory, it seems like Bill Belichick continues to get the job done. I mean, again, they're 5-6, but you've got a few games here or there. If it goes their way, they'd be in a much stronger position to make the playoffs. I mean, it really is incredible, even after Brady leaves, that, you see the Patriots still, in the playoff picture in the AFC East.
Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, I think Brady touched on it at the end there, but it's really the offense that needs to take another step forward to really be, a team that can contend. And, I mean, you look at them, it's really been such a drop-off at the wide receiver position for them. You got a guy like Jacoby Myers is their number one receiver right now. And I hadn't even heard of him a year ago or 2 years ago even. So Cam Newton doesn't have a whole lot of weapons around him right now. Damian Harris has certainly seen an uptick in production. He's been good. But, I think the calling card for the Patriots and what it has to be and what it will continue to be this season, I think will be the defense. Obviously getting Gilmore back is huge for them. And they like to play these low-scoring games, kind of pound it out like they did against the Ravens in that. Was it? I think it was a Sunday night game, right?
It was.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how they want to play. They dominated that game. That's how they want to continue to play going forward, I feel like.
Brady, to close out this podcast, I want to do a rapid fire round with you. We've done this a little bit before, but you are a Virginia Tech guy. You've been to every game for as long as you can remember. So I want to do a rapid fire round about the Hokies. You ready to be on the hot seat?
Yeah, man, bring it on.
All right, so what's the worst game you've seen as a Hokie fan? Now, you can quantify it as either it was the biggest blowout or just the most gut-wrenching loss. What would you say is the biggest or the worst game you've seen as a Hokie fan?
2018 Pittsburgh at Pitt, the only Tech game I've ever left early, and it was freezing cold. But when Quadri Allison took off for a 90-plus yard touchdown to just stick a knife in our throat, I said, let's get out of the wind and go back to Virginia.
Best who's on the Mount Rushmore of Hokies? Now you can quantify it as players that you've seen or all-time Hokies because technically Michael Vick. I mean, we were all very young when he was with the Hokies, but how would you classify your Mount Rushmore of Virginia Tech players?
I would say in my lifetime, what I can remember, I'm going to throw Vick on there just because I love Michael Vick. You'd be remiss if you didn't put Tyrod on there. D'Angelo Hall, I think, is another one, and I will also go with Kevin Jones with a very close runner-up being Jake Grove.
Okay, some interesting names. So how about what would you say is the best game you've attended at Lane Stadium?
There's a ton. I really liked the 6 overtime game last year against Carolina. I like the 2011 Miami game. The 2009 Nebraska game sticks out. 2002 LSU, throwback there. So been a lot of fun games. And even that 2018 UVA game was a lot of fun.
How about the best player you've seen at Lane Stadium, whether it was for the Hokies or the opposing team?
There's been so many guys that have came through there, and whether it's a Chris Long at Virginia or Devin Hester at Miami or Andre Johnson at Miami or that 2001 Miami team is just unreal in itself. And then that 2015 Ohio State team is, my gosh, you got talents all over the field. Michael Thomas, Ezekiel Elliott, Cardell Jones, guys like that. And then Aaron Donald from Pitt. Then you got guys at West Virginia, Pat White, Steve Slayton, those guys. Just a ton of great talent. And I know I've left somebody off, Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, it's just a long, lengthy list of players. Jacoby Brissett. I could be here all day telling you guys.
And I'll close out with, how about your favorite basketball memory?
Oh, man. My favorite basketball memory, there's a handful of them, but I think the coolest one was the Hokies beat Duke in 2018, my senior year, Buzz's last year, and I'm going to the car. You storm the floor, everybody's stoked, and you go back. And growing up, man, I remember Brian Chase being the best player for the Hokies in Atlantic 10, and the Hokies not being very good in the Big East. And then the early years of the ACC, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, getting to be in the NCAA tournament. And I remember my first ever Tech game, Tech versus Liberty, the year after the Hokies made the NCAA tournament with Jamon Gordon and Xavier Dowdell and those guys. And just watching Deron Washington, who's still by far my favorite Hokie hooper ever, just shoot free throws, and thought that was just awesome. And, my senior year, the Hokies beat more ranked teams than they ever have in school history. Virginia, Clemson, Duke, and Carolina all in the same year. And as a kid, I would have told you that was crazy and that you never would have thought that you'd see that. But having that memory, just storming the court that night, walking back and listening to Lays and Buzz in the press conference, and you're just like, man, this is something I literally thought I never would see. And, people talking about hot takes earlier, the Hokies football program will never be as good as it once was. And I don't sincerely believe that, but my freshman year, when I'm watching the Hokies lose to Radford and App State, and then my sophomore year losing to Alabama State or A&M, I don't even remember who it was, but 2 years removed to beat the Blue Bloods, really cool, and to see them hang with UK at Rupp Arena, it was just really cool. So I'd say that Duke win in the regular season put the cherry on top for sure.
Cory, any of those takes that you agreed with, any of the games that Brady mentioned, any other games you want to throw in, whether it was the worst game, favorite memory, I mean, anything you want to throw in there?
The worst game that I've definitely been to was the loss to JMU in the pouring rain. My family got tickets to that game, and we were at that game. That was absolutely miserable. But I actually agree. So the Duke game for basketball that you're talking about, was that the one with the Chris Clark put back at the end? Yeah, that's definitely the game that sticks out to me as well. A lot of people say that UVA overtime win, but that win against Duke, like my family per se, we grew up hating Duke, like hating Coach K and everything that he was about. And I mean, he's a great guy, obviously, but just the success that they've had and all the Dukies and stuff like that. We grew up hating Duke. So to have the Hokies beat them on a last second kind of, shot like that where Chris Clark puts it back, and Hokies were pretty much trailing like that entire game and kind of got it back there at the end. That's the game that sticks out to me as well in basketball. Favorite basketball, Brady mentioned a couple guys. I think another guy too that doesn't get enough credit that he should is Malcolm Delaney. Just watching him and all that he was those years, I loved Malcolm Delaney. I think he's still my favorite Virginia Tech basketball player to this day. So, yeah.
I would say the two games that stick out to me, the Ohio State game, my freshman year, Monday night, defending champion. That was my first ever Hokies game, so that always is special to me. And then also got to bring it up, the Sweet 16 loss to Duke. Ahmed Hill misses the putback. The only solace I have in that is that it wouldn't have won the game. It would have sent it to overtime, and then we all know Kerry Blackshear would have fouled out in the first 30 seconds. So, at the end of the day, we probably lost to the better team, so I can't be too mad about that. And then, you guys mentioned players. I have to throw in Justin Robinson and Tim Settle, two guys I met my freshman year. In fact, Tim Settle helped me move out of my dorm. That's a story for another day. But I'm seriously considering, as a football team fan, getting his jersey for Christmas. So we'll see what happens with that. But Brady, always enjoy talking to you. You're a walking Hokie encyclopedia, as I like to say. Always awesome to hear your insight on Virginia Tech, and I really hope you come back on our podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, and hope to see you guys soon.
And Cory, we'll see what happens with the Hokies and the Who's, but let's hope next week we have something better to talk about.
Yeah, we will certainly all be tuned in Saturday night on the ACC Network to see how it turns out.
So for special guest Brady Hess and my podcast partner, Uncle Cornelius Michael Van Dyke, I am Hot Take Billy Parvatam on hand. We thank you so much for joining us on another edition of Real Talk with Billy and Cory. We'll see you next time. Love you 2000.